Hello, everyone. It's Claire O'Berry with the Dying Your Way podcast. And welcome. Welcome again. I just love how our subscriber base is growing. And one of the reasons it's growing is because the people that I interview have just an incredible base of knowledge, and they cover a variety of topics. And the person that we're going to be interviewing, or I'm going to be in there, I am going to be interviewing today, is someone I've wanted to talk with for a long time, Suzanne O'Brien. I met Suzanne O'Brien in New York City, 2017, I believe, and it was an international doula conference. And it was in the early stages of really developing the profession of an end-of-life doula and getting it out through various organizations like the National Hospice and Palliative Care Organization, which Suzanne is a founding member of the End-of-Life Doula Council that is part of that very important networking organization in the United States. She has her own amazing resume and credentials. She's a hospice RN, an RN for oncology. And she also has an international speaker, best-selling author. She has a passion to end-of-life care that is just full of intelligence, integrity, and just really loving practical knowledge that resonated with me when I met her. And seeing what she's done to just really speed this movement forward so people do have quality of life at the end of life has truly been amazing and inspiring to me. So I would like you all to meet right now, Suzanne O'Brien.
Thank you so very much. It's an honor to be here. I am thrilled. It's a long time coming that we got together in a conversation.
I know.
But everything happens in its divine timing. So thank you so much for having me on your show.
Well, it's wonderful to have you. You have there's just so many things that we can talk about. I mean, one of the things I've learned about the end of life dialogue is that there are so many topics that you could literally spend days just talking about one topic. But I just want to share with you part of my personal experience. I mean, Dying Your Way was the context for that is that I was traveling and it was hard to work with people except by emails or phone calls because I was just always out of pocket. And before COVID, we set up doula access with certified end-of-life doulas online. And that was before COVID. So it's really been helpful to use what I've learned from people like yourself and apply it, not all of the skills, but I'd say 75% of the skills online. And you have a lot of trainings that are also now online that are international in reach. Before we get into that, though, I really want to just get a little bit about your backstory and how you went from, oncology to the end-of-life realm that you're in now.
Sure. What an honor. It has been an incredible journey. And I often think about it because it has its own twists and turns to it, like all of our pathways, when we follow our purpose. So my background is I'm a registered nurse, and I have a background in oncology, which is cancer care and hospice care. And I'll tell you how that happened. I was working in the mainstream hospital, and our elders would come in and people would die. And I would notice that many times nobody was coming to those rooms to see them. There was no family. There was no real extra attention being given, even though it really warranted that, because this was like the end of life moment and the people would die by themselves. And I thought, what is going on here? Where's the disconnect? And I said, I kept feeling this pull to hospice. And I said, this is a space that really needs that kind of time and care. And I want to be in that space. And I thought for sure it'd be different when I got there, because it would be the end of life, that there'd be time with patients and there'd be open conversations, and and there wasn't. And I would be in my Honda Civic. I was doing home care hospice, and I'd be literally running around the county all week long and trying to get every patient, you can't be everywhere at once. And I'd have about 14 patients. And we were trying, this is our one opportunity to have this go well. We don't get a do-over. We don't get a do-over for this patient or family. And they were coming up short all of the time. And so I thought, okay, what's happened here? I grew up in a medical family. So I remember my father having conversations with my mother about people that got ill, about compassion, about rallying to help people in that moment of crisis, whether it's just compassion or lending a hand or whatever it would be. So I was aware that death was a natural part of the life cycle, but most of our world is not in that space. We've somehow removed it. And there's a couple of reasons why. So when I got in hospice care, and I still, no matter how hard I tried, couldn't really make that difference, I said, wait a minute, we've got to take a look at this. And where did we go left when we should have went right, or wherever you want to say. So it's great that there's amazing people in that space, but this all needed a cultural shift of awareness. And that's when the concept of the hospice nurse is to teach the loved ones how to care for their dying family member. And most people don't understand this model. So when I'm there for 1 hour once a week, if my patient was stable, and I'm trying to teach that family who don't know the first thing usually about this, and the fear is present, it's virtually impossible.
Right.
So it's kind of like the perfect storm, what my mother calls. And so what I said is, let me develop a training based on my hospice, how to care for people, and we can give it to people before they need it. And my hospice said, this is fantastic. We love the training. We can't use it. I said, why? They said, because we won't get reimbursed for it. We won't be able to get paid for it with the system. And I thought, I'll just go teach it at the library for free. And I did. And it filled up, and it turned into where we are now in this, global movement of, our humanity, really our holistic humanity.
I want to underscore something that you said that I think is so important, and like you pointed out, is so unknown, is that the information that you're providing, that you're teaching, is beneficial because you're learning it before you need it, before you're in the chaotic moment. And that has been my experience as well, is that the all of the good training that we have been given and have learned is not being utilized in a way, I guess you could say the same way that hospice is called in too late, but it's not being utilized because people are in a fraught state when they need us, when they need it. So that education that you went to the library with is what makes all the difference.
It does. And it's, when I really put this all together, because I had to really take a look at what happened here so that we could come up with solutions. And it was, that life expectancy almost doubled in the last 100 years, that we're teaching our doctors how to keep people alive, but not teaching them how to support people at the end of life, which is a natural part of the journey, by the way. So like those things, and then this fear of death that came about, because I feel like most of us, we don't know about it. We don't see it. It's been completely removed. So it's this foreign thing that became fearful for whatever reason, but bringing that back and allowing a space where we can. So what I love about the training is that it's infused with bedside patient stories. And once you can safely and lovingly step into this natural part of our journey, but also there's so many incredible sacred moments and beautiful moments and teaching moments. So people have come to that and said, so the fear's not in front of them at that moment, they can learn it. And they've said, wait a minute, this has really opened me up, some of these aha moments. And one of the things is that realizing that time is your most valuable commodity, and who you choose to spend it with and how you choose to spend it are the most important decisions you'll ever make in your life, because we just don't know how much time we have.
Could you paint the picture for our audience? I think I heard BJ Miller, say this word first, silver tsunami. Could you paint the picture realistically, not to scare people, but just to give a realistic picture of what is coming globally for the planet, but certainly for Western civilizations, because we don't tend to deal with, like you say, it's been removed and we haven't seen death. So we don't know what to expect, but people really don't know what's coming. And maybe you could paint that picture for us.
I would love to. And let me begin with saying that death is not a medical experience. It's a human one. And I think we forgot that. So we've given it over to the medical system. We expect them to fix it, all this kind of craziness. And we don't even want to talk about it. And again, death can be our greatest teacher about life, but we can talk about that in another moment. I've been calling an elder care crisis for almost 15 years, if not more, because of this population, because of the elders that are coming into the hospital. And again, I'm speaking from being that nurse in that med surg and seeing these elders come in and saying, wait a minute, we don't have the time, the capacity. Where's the family unit? Like, what has happened here? Now, this demographic shift is going to increase for decades to come. And our system is not nearly set up. So when you say westernized, United States for sure, but it's a global problem. Why? Because westernized medicine is infiltrated everywhere. And again, it's a good thing if we use it, don't let it get carried away and forget that this is a human experience. So when I run all the numbers and I post them all the time, not to scare anyone, but we have such an aging population like we've never seen before. And I think they said by 2030, a third of the population will be, significantly older. But what really struck me is how many people in the United States didn't have children. So there's a section, and I think it's about 18 million people right now that are over 65, that it's usually the adult children who will care for aging parents. Not always, by the way, not always. It's not always possible. But there's this whole pool that don't even have that option. And then there's this whole other segment that we just don't have the setup for. And the other factor is that most people want to be at home at the end of life.
Yeah.
And we expect the caregivers to do that care. How do we expect them to do it when they don't know the first thing and they're petrified? We need to come out and bring back death back into the natural fold of light. Let it teach us, let it show us how we are so much more connected and similar than different. I think that's contributing to the chaos that we have in the world right now.
Yeah.
Is actually not having that be part of it.
Yeah. And we're living so much longer with good health because of modern medicine. I mean, we are living longer with good health for the most part. But I think about the people in the generation before me, grandparents that died, I'm past the time that when they died, so it's having role models for how to live into your 80s and 90s. We really don't have that. We're the first generation to do that.
So there are multiple problems here, Claire, not just the support emotionally and what that means to care for somebody at the end of life, but just living every year, how much that costs. What if somebody has physical limitations, cognitive limitations, or both? We're not at all aware of all of that. We don't have the structure for it for the most part. So I always say good news, bad news. Good news is average age of life is 80. Bad news is we don't know how to support people and families in that and do it well. But we're getting there.
Yeah. But I think, again, you've touched on it, people being alone at the time of death. And if people could put themselves in that environment. I mean, I know it's an intimate experience and some people want to be alone, but some people or just want a small number of people around. But, if people put themselves in a position where they were seeing actual people dying, I think that would do a lot to remove the fear of death, because if all you've done is, watched, news and watched, gaming and things like that, that's pretty much your only experience of what death is. And
that's not an accurate one. It's not an accurate one, by the way. So I remember it was literally in 2009 and I was in the oncology unit. And it was so interesting to me because you'd have, all different types of experiences with patients and every door looked the same, going in. And one person might be, suffering from chemo side effects. One person might be newly diagnosed. One person might be dying. And I remember that there was a family and they knew how to do it. Their energy was there. The person was having their end of life. And I came out of that room and I said, if people knew death could be like that, if they knew it could be like that, they'd never be afraid. And then I said, okay, I'm going to share that. I'm going to share these stories. And they just, kept building and building. And there's practical elements that can have it go well. Just by the awareness that one day my journey will be different, not like the one I know. It makes me live every day very differently.
Yeah. So just touch on some of the things that do make a difference, that make it go well versus not going well.
Absolutely. So there's two things that I have found in my experience that have made end of life 80 to 90% better, no matter what the disease process is. Number one, learning the skills of what it's like to care for somebody at end of life, stepping into that space, empowering yourself, demystifying it. Okay. And then you're there, you're able to be present with your loved one. And the second is planning ahead with your advanced directive, or thinking about what you would want or not want for end of life care, what quality of life means to you. Because then when it does show up, we have a blueprint, we have a roadmap, and we know that 100% of the time it's going, we don't know when, but we know it is. And so why not, again, have some kind of foundational structure about it? But I will tell you that the gift of awareness changes the way that you live on a daily basis. Because I remember I never started living more fully than I started working for hospice. And why? Because I remember coming home, first of all, there was such a beautiful connection to these patients and families. But I would come home and it would be like, wow, I can go for a walk in the sun. I can walk my dog. There was just a heightened appreciation of gratitude of everything. And that just elevates your energy to no end. So, yeah.
But there are skills and things that we learn as end of life doulas that I volunteer. I'm jumping around. I volunteered a hospice here in Busselton, Western Australia, and they have a wonderful hospice unit in the hospital there. They don't do as much dying at home yet. They're trying to set that up here, but it's commonly done in this hospice unit. And I went into one of the rooms and was instantly struck by the sacredness and the smells and the energy of that room. And then as I saw the family that had gathered around, the person that was holding the space, the daughter, was an end-of-life doula. And she knew how to hold that space in a way that it was quiet, that the lights were low, that the energy was good, the aromatherapy was going on. And it was, and I walked out of there knowing the other people that were in the rooms down the hall. And I'm not there as an end-of-life doula, I'm there as a volunteer. So it's slightly different role. But what a difference that doulas make to that actual time when someone is passing, and how fortunate that family was that their daughter had those skills and brought that into the room.
Absolutely. But I think that what you just said is so important for people to hear, that doula holding the space when right now people, for the most part, are very frightened. They don't know the first thing about end of life, and just having that person in there, creating a safe space, saying, I'm here with you, we've got this, allows it to be a very different energy. And again, hopefully we can teach ahead of time more of these skills. But right now we're trailing behind in a very big way, as you know, with end of life, it's not going well. And you add to that a global pandemic of fear and people dying of all ages. We really have to do what we can to make this world a better place for one another in this space.
Sure. Well, so how has, in the United States, it hasn't affected us so much here in Australia, but how has the pandemic affected end of life and particularly being able to use the doula at the end of life? How has that set us back in a sense, or maybe it hasn't, I don't know.
Well, it presented obstacles, but that, life does. So I have to say, I'm super happy to hear that you didn't have that being affected in that way. And I was in New York City at the time that the pandemic first hit. And it was devastating. And one of the first things that really I thought I have to come up with an answer to is that I would hold death cafes at the local library in Manhattan. And I'd have so many people come to those on a regular basis. And I knew that if we were in lockdown, not knowing what was going to happen with death all around us, what was going to happen with these people isolated? And I didn't know what was happening. None of us really knew. So we put immediately those online, but called them life cafes because I thought death was a little too much in your face.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing. We're talking about that. So then what do we do as doulas? So we had families calling us. We had medical practitioners calling us. It was devastating and people were dying all over. It was horrible. And so we couldn't go in the homes because of the COVID. So we had to do Tele doula, which is exactly what you're talking about. And I've been doing Tele doula work without calling it Tele doula for years because we just don't have doulas everywhere.
Right.
And so what I did was put a program together for this, teach everyone how to do it, utilize technology, be able to have, vigils with, either a Zoom or some kind of private Facebook group, have it with people from all around the world that can't get there. I mean, it was challenging and it worked really well. It worked really well. And what we have found is that the teledoula, almost a combination of in-person and teledoula, is really what people want because they don't always need that person there all the time or through the journey, but also we just we don't have doulas everywhere. And so to have access to these practitioners supporting you through your journey through technology is a real gift. And you know what? It works and it works really well.
Yeah.
So I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah.
But I have to tell you, it has been you can only imagine, it has been a year of nonstop showing up in this space. And we continue to do it just because that's what's being called upon.
So
right
what's the silver lining? Is there a silver lining in that?
There is. There's a huge silver lining, I think, in all of this work that we do surrounding end of life. And that is that let death bring us back together. There's no greater truth than the end of life and what people say. And they talk about what struck me when I was the hospice nurse and in this space is the same things that people would say from different cultures and different religions. And I was privileged to go work in Africa and volunteer and in Thailand. And when people are at the end of life, there's many things that are the same themes. I'm going home. They talk about going home, this bigger home. They talk about there being no judgment. They talk about unconditional love being the goal of everything that they've been through. So and I just want to share with you what I feel is going on is that when people we're 4 bodies of energy. We're physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. And that makes up our being, right? So when you're at the end of life and you're sitting at the bedside with somebody and their physical body is literally diminishing and dissolving, their ego's dissolving and their spiritual body is growing. This happens organically. There's a place in that journey that they get this spiritual wisdom, what I call their spiritual awareness. And literally I understand now. I know why that happened. And there's so much enlightenment. And for everyone to hear what they have to share lives their life completely different because of that. It's all about love. It's all about, there was no judgment. There's no judgment on me. There's no judgment on you. And that we're all connected and And I think that if we can bring back the teachings that this sacred space brings us, would we literally be pointing fingers at each other or be, wishing ill or bombing? Because if we're all connected to something, right? And that we're not different, then I think we would look at how we're living each day and what we're doing on that level very, very differently. And end of life teaches us, but we don't see it. Many people haven't seen it. So we have to share.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I see the moments when people are transitioning that are have an awareness, and the lack of fear that it's there. I mean, I would have thought that would be commonplace, but it's uncommon, having fear there is usually an uncommon thing. So if people could see the awe and the sacred feeling that's in a room when someone is passing, it is, if you see it, then there's less fear when it's your time and you can teach the next generation and the next. I mean, it's just a beautiful experience.
It is. And I just want to share with you another common thing that happens is people will talk about being visited by people who have died before them. And so if there was any fear when this happens, and again, maybe not everyone will share it with you, or everyone will, I think everyone experiences on some level. So I've been with a lot of people, and when they share that their mother was here or that their father is here, whether you believe it or not, and I teach this for the doulas because you need to know that, first of all, it means that they're going to be leaving us soon. So it means that they're getting ready to go. But it also, the unbelievable serenity, excitement, connection. So if there was any fear, like they're like, see you later. We're like, they're ready to go. And so it's so exciting to be able to witness that, to feel that energy. And then of course, to remember that person in that place of no fear and of that, that connection with something far greater than what most of us understand here right now.
So what are the obstacles right now? I mean, we talked about it's access to finding a doula is hard, but on the other end of that, there are obstacles to doulas connecting with the patients that need them as well. So what is happening in that space that they can't find each other?
Well, I think again, this is a subject that is the #1 fear now in the world. So to open up that conversation, I think just takes, again, just opening your heart and creating the safe thing, which again, if we start with the fact that, death is a human experience and it used to be revered as a sacred one. And let's talk about what that looks like, that each of us are going to be touched by it and it can go well. So for me, what I share with doulas, which I think is one of the most important things that you are representing, is really a way to reach your communities, for them to ask questions, for them to step into this space, because you all have, no matter where you live in the world, you all have so much information about hospice or about care. And so I always say to people, offer yourself once a month to do something at the library or to do something in your community, and let people come when they want to, and let them talk about it, let them share that this is available. And all of a sudden that just starts building this incredible, not only momentum, but this community with all different types of people. And then when somebody needs your support and services, they know where to go. So it's like a win-win-win situation. And that's what I really encourage people to do, is just say, hey, this is what I do. I'm an end-of-life doula. I'm going to be here. Come ask any questions you want. Let's have a dialogue about this.
Yeah, I am watching the news from here about the United States and looking at how the infrastructure bill, and that they've put aged care in, I don't know if it's one of two bills, but that is part of it. And so I am kind of fascinated about public policy and using public policy to get rid of the silos that are in our medical system, and making I was actually talking to someone here in Australia, an end-of-life strategist with the Groundswell Project, and she's in a position and a platform to actually talk to the leaders in Australia about this. And we were talking about, the need to support people to die at home, and that there needed to be someone who was connected to all of the community services to get that support to that person, and that palliative approach to end-of-life care. And I said, so who would do this? And she was like, well, social workers. And, I said, end-of-life doulas are trained in every aspect about end of life and anticipating transitions. You do have trained doulas in Eastern Australia anyway, and just consider that. And again, as the government people were aware that there is this whole profession of people that are trained to support end of life.
Yeah. And I think bringing it back to a holistic, non-medical profession is super important, especially in the United States, because we're also crazy about documentation and this rule and that rule. And, we've gotten so far away from the patient care at the bedside.
Yeah.
And time is your best medicine is your presence with end of life, and really with anything, your presence. And we just don't, as medical practitioners, have that ability anymore here because of the way it's set up. But the good news is that death is not a medical experience. It's great to have that support, but really we can do this. We know how to do this. And then if we put it back in the hands of community, back taking care of each other, well, that just alleviates all of that issue with the system. Now, as far as housing goes, I think for the United States, I'd like to do something called doula houses, where we have these holistic, beautiful homes that people come live as a family style. So hopefully, I don't know how that magic is going to happen, but I am putting it out there to the universe. But we really need that, because we just have so many people the families can't care for them, or they don't have family. And the nursing home structure is really not a great one. So I have things bubbling. I don't know what's going to happen yet, but we will keep that vision and intention, because we really need it. And it can be so much fun. I mean,
so really are you talking about a place for people as they are transitioning in the latter stages of their lives to come live there with doulas? That's a great idea.
Yeah, I think so too. I think so, aging and then their end of life, obviously. And I think what level they can contribute, then they will do that. Like if they can help with gardening or cooking or, whatever, and then we care for each other. And then there can be doulas that can come in and actually get their training. With in that institution. And then of course I want to add in rescuing some animals that we can have as
of course
the pet area, of course. But it feels really good, and again, this is really what end of life has taught us, is how compassion and kindness and love and non-judgment and presence is absolutely everything to this life. And so if we can then create that in a space of caring for our elders and end of life, but also you and I talk about that now, how to incorporate that into our world. I can hopefully create a lot of healing that is much needed.
Yeah, I love your vision of that, Suzanne. It's a beautiful vision, and you've been holding this space and this this profession, as a profession, and you've done so much to establish the core competencies that are part of this profession. And I really want to thank you for that.
It's an honor. I want to share how that and why that happened. This is a non-medical holistic profession, which we absolutely love. And I would go to doctors and I would be in talks years ago, and they'd say, this is great, we love it, but we need to know exactly what you do across the board so that we can get behind that to families. And because there was, a doula training over here and a doula training here, and they're all beautiful and wonderful, but sometimes very different curriculum, there had to be some cohesive way that we could say, okay, if there was a doula who went through, again, a training program, we know that she or he's walking through the door with a certain skill set, which is really important for families. They're in crisis. They want, and also for medical doctors and hospices to say, yes, we want to share you with families. So we need to know, what are those core competencies? What can we expect when you walk through the door? And so we're like, okay, we'll create it. So that way, and so it's been a beautiful, beautiful movement, I think, on so many levels, and doctors as well. Yeah. I remember one in Sloan Kettering, he said, if you can really do what you say you can do, we would love it. We would love it, because we know that they don't have enough support at home.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and doctors need training too. I mean, really, so much of what, I train and that you train, it's just something that doctors haven't gotten that in medical school. I mean, they're trained to heal people. And you, as you pointed out, it's a spiritual human event that is happening when someone is dying. And, it can often be viewed as a failure by professionals. And that is, and as I've just seen a discomfort that they have in holding that space and taking the time and the softness and the, you can
it's really unfair what we've taught them and told them, that if their patient dies, they failed. So literally we set them up for 100% failure. And it's very interesting because I remember being in the oncology unit and I would watch a doctor go down the hallway with his head down, looking like, just, and their 97-year-old patient had their end of life after being treated for, cancer. 97 years old, and you treated them, and they, of course, they were going to have an end of life at some point. How is it that we have put this? So it's unfair on many levels.
Yeah.
Not, and I remember one time I was in the New York City office and the phone rang and I answered the phone. There was a doctor from critical care in Miami. And he said, just like this, he said, you have to help us. And I said, okay. It was a little bit of older person's voice. And he said, families want us to fix it. They want us to intubate and do things that I don't feel is appropriate, but they're expecting us. And the hospital really doesn't want to back us. They want to back the families. And he said, it's such a mess. I said, we're working as hard as we can, and I'll work double and triple, but it's really something that we have to move forward with together with awareness. Yeah.
So how do you see, as we come out of the pandemic, and surely that will happen at some point, but how do you see this, how do you envision this going forward as supporting end-of-life care, doulas supporting end-of-life care, but how do you see this globally happening in a way that can be a silver lining in a horrible situation?
There is. And, I call them the blessings of COVID. And I know that, it's hard to kind of wrap your head around that, but I always think, again, from a spiritual perspective, if you can step into that, what is the lesson here? What can we learn? What is a gift here? And I think there's been several things that have been acutely aware within COVID. Number one, though, is that death will be a part of our journey. We don't know when it will show up. And what I really love is that there wasn't one person that was not touched by this awareness. I remember that in 2019, I was doing trainings, doula givers trainings in Thailand, and I went up to the mountains in Chiang Mai, remote with some elephants, and took care of an elephant. And I remember them posting about COVID shutting them down. So everyone is aware now. Before it was like, okay, maybe I want to step into this space, but I don't want to, a lot of people were like, I don't want to think about it. Now we know that one day we will, for not only ourselves, but our families. And I think we're also aware now, if I don't prepare loosely, if I don't think about where do I want my things to go? Or like just about that what 1,000 times more challenging that is. It also, I think, allows us to say, wow, there are no guarantees here. There's no such thing as security. There's no such thing as guaranteed time. What is really important to me, and getting on that. So I think there are blessings of it. I know that we've increased not only our enrollment by 104% in 2020, but also which is like really huge. And then the phone calls from families, from doctors, I think people want to know this isn't working by just ignoring it. So let's bring back again, not only the practical skills, but also the lessons about how to live life together.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's just so important to have an awareness of death literacy and what needs to happen, before it happens, and whether it's through the Dying Your Way death literacy training, or from your doula giver training that trains caregivers on what to do when they are in the thick of it. Do that before you're in the thick of it. It's just so important to do it before. And and everybody can take this information and apply it to their own individual circumstances. And what may work for one person, you need something completely different. But it encompasses enough that you can certainly get so much information that can make such a difference at the end of life.
It does. It really does. And I think for me, what was really very important moment is noticing as a hospice nurse how removed and checked out and detached families were in that last moment, and they missed it. You know what I mean? They didn't have that safety or security or groundedness to have conversations with their mother, to thank her, to tell her that they love her, because this fear was there. And I have to tell you, I had several families where the patient actually was actively dying or died in front of them, and they didn't even know it, because they were so removed with the fear. And I thought, okay, we need to back this up. And I think, again, that when you share those sacred moments of what patients say, and all of a sudden you take something that you thought was so fearful and you're like, wait a minute, maybe this information can teach me how to make the most out of this journey. Something that should not be fearful at all, not rushed, but not feared. That's for sure.
I just really love how you're adapting to and being flexible to the circumstances that are on the ground, and that you're able to take that training to people to adapt and adjust to things that are, as they're happening on the ground. We all need to be doing that, all of us.
Yeah, I think I appreciate you saying that. And I think that was so frustrating as a nurse is coming up with really just practical common sense things. And they're being like, well, we have to like put in for that. And then it has to be approved and and you're like, what? We just need more people to feed the lunch to people that can't open the like, this is nonsense. So bringing back that awareness. And again, if something is in front of you, and again, I teach doulas this because all those different variables you talk about, there's not one end of life that will be exactly the same as another because of the different elements that are there. You have to have an ebb and flow. You have to be able to say, okay, this comes up. What can we do? Don't just accept it, because people were saying, well, that's all we can do. That's all that hospice can provide. I said, that's not enough. So if you can't provide it from in the system, I get that your hands are tied. We can supplement with non-medical people, and that can make the perfect answer.
Yeah, and what doulas are so good at is that they come into the front door and they have a bag of tricks, and they have an awareness to assess a situation and pull out whatever needs to help that particular situation, that particular person. So
yeah, I call them doula pearls, which they are. But I also, I think that one of the things that I found is that when you walk into that home and you do this and you're not afraid, all of a sudden people are like, oh, wait a minute, she does this all the time and she's not freaking out. Maybe we don't need to. It's almost like this unspoken sort of, the energy starts to settle. And then of course the doula will see what are the acute issues, what's needed right this moment, and help to get that to a stabilized state, which is really great.
Well, Suzanne, I first of all, thank you for the time. I know it's evening, it's late evening there, and here we are, but so there will be listeners, I'm sure, that will be interested in finding out more about your Doula Givers program and training with you specifically. And how can people reach you and contact you and enroll in your training and all of that?
Sure. Well, thank you so much for that. So I think one of the best ways to do this is that we have, again, a platform where we train family caregivers, community volunteers for free. So I do that every month that I'm on there, and they, the training is literally 90 minutes in its training, and I'm on there steadily for 4 hours because I answer everyone's questions, which is beautiful. So that is every month you can come on, but we've started a membership and training site on Facebook where you can get those trainings there, and you can come and you can meet and network with people. And again, that's a great place to get education, free training, and meet other doulas if you're interested in this. And I think that's a great place to start. So
well, we'll have the links in the podcast. So yeah, do learn more from Suzanne, because she's a great trainer. I can speak personally to that. So thank you so much for your time, and have a good evening and lots of love.
Thank you so much for having me and for all you do. Thank you so much.
Thank you.